Alright, so in this video we are looking at variables, and we're using Python for this, and we're just going to talk about variables and really talk about the naming conventions that we use for this, because we want to make sure that when we use variables that we use them the correct way and in a way that's helpful to us and for others if looking at our program. So to kind of reference back a little bit, variables are spots in memory that hold information, right? So we could ask for an input, and we could assign it a value. So let's say, for example, I'm going to just have a variable called num, and we're going to assign it to the value of 10. And if we were to print that variable, then when we run this, it's just going to print 10 over here. Okay. Now, when we create these variables, I could also just call this A if I wanted to, and I could say we'll print A. And it will do that. That is not a problem. It will easily do that. However, this is not the best way to name a variable. Okay, so we'll kind of start at the beginning here. Variable names, they can be letters and numbers. We shouldn't really start the variable with a number. So let's say we have multiple numbers that we're going to have, and this is going to be num1, and then we're going to do another number, and we're going to call it num2, and maybe that's got 15, and we'll just leave it at that, and we'll say that we're going to add those two together, and we're going to do num1 plus num2, and it'll take this value and take this value, add them together, and we'll get 25. Okay, so we can have letters and numbers in these. However, some languages allow this, and we do 1 num and 2 num. This is not the best way to do this. You do not want to put a number in front. Now, some languages allow it, some do not. Let's just see if Python will allow us to run that. And we get an error because it does not allow you to have a number as the leading character here. Okay, so we really need to kind of get rid of those and put num1, num2, num1, and num2. Okay, so we want to make sure that we name them the correct way. So we can use numbers, but we don't want them to be the very first thing. They can be later on within the name of the variable. Okay, also, if we wanted to, instead of using 1, maybe we want to use like this, num1 and num2. Okay, now in this case, it's not perfect way to use this, but what we really want to make sure when we do this, we're actually using, this is one word and this is another word, right? Or let's use a different example. Let's say we're going to do first name, and that first name is going to be John. Okay, and notice I use quotations because it's now text, right? And so we're going to actually have that as just text. But it's important, we're combining two words here to form our variable. We really should use this. So these stand out. So this is first name, right? And if we were going to do another one, we can do second name or last name. Okay. And then maybe that's going to be, Smith. And so when we do this, we want to make sure if we're combining two words that we want to make sure the second word is capitalized. It's not so much a requirement, but we want to make sure those stand out so it's easier to read and look at. Okay. And then also you could do, if you wanted, instead of just doing it this way, you could also add an underscore here. Okay. And in this particular case, when we do this, this is actually called camel case, okay, where we're going to just put an underscore there and separate these two out. This is a great way to do this. And then when we print these off, we can do first name and last name. And so we get John Smith, okay? So we can use this camel case great way to do this. It separates it out, makes it very easy to see that this variable is first name, last name. Maybe it's something that you're doing like the height of a tree or something like that, right? And so maybe it would be tree height, and you can, I can add another variable here, and we can do tree height, okay? And that could be a number, right? It could be 15 or whatever, 15 feet high. But it is important that you separate these out. And in this case, if I'm going to use a camel case, maybe you don't want to necessarily capitalize the first letter of the second variable, and that's totally acceptable. But you want to make sure that you have some way to extend those out, to separate them so that you can see that this is the first word of this variable compared and the additional word on the second side of this, whether it's capitalized or using an underscore here. Okay, so when you do variables, make sure that they are something that's relevant, so I don't just name these A, B, and C, because as your program grows, and obviously this is just 7 lines, but really just 5 lines of code, you get 100 lines of code and you forget what you were using A for, or B for, or C for. It's important that you name those properly so that you can use them later on in your program. So really think about naming them to represent what the variable actually is being used for, whether it's text or numbers or whatever that is, or a Boolean. And then make sure that you don't put a number first. And then if you are combining 2 words into your variable, like this first name, you could use the camel case like this with the underscore. You could not do that and just do the capital N like that. Both work very, fine. I can just go ahead and do this and get rid of my tree height here for just a second. And when I print these off, it'll print both of those, and not a problem because the computer actually is able to read those and understand. All right, hopefully that helps you with coding, and good luck.